Alright, welcome in everyone. We're going to do a little overview live stream for the upcoming severe weather. As you can see, we have an enhanced risk, level 3 out of 5, for parts of Arkansas and surrounding regions, mainly the Texarkana area. Then as we go into tomorrow, we have a squall line that's going to transition, move over towards the Mississippi, Alabama, to the Carolinas East Coast region. That could also have some more severe weather with it rather. So a lot to talk about. First of all, before we get going into all of that, I kind of want to look at the severe weather going over in the Little Rock region. So as you can see, we have some hail that was actually reported with this near the turn that off and see where that is. It's going to be near the Pottsville area, kind of near Russellville. You did have a pretty strong storm that came through the region. You can see those brighter pink colors. That shows that we have about 60 dBz of hail falling over there coming up towards the Scotland region. But overall, this is not going to be all too tornadic. Nothing too much to worry about with this. For the main region of our temperatures are relatively low. As you can see, we're in the 50s. If you're in the Hot Springs region, it's going to be 58, Little Rock 59, Batesville around 52. So if you walk outside in this region, it is not going to feel like a severe weather overnight risk would. However, what the SPC and what we are expecting is these temperatures are going to kind of rise up as we go on throughout time. And I actually have a kind of graphic prepared for this here. So this is your warmer temperatures right about there. So these are your 60s, 70s. This is going to all try to evect north. I'm going to go full screen on this. Evect north into your Little Rock, Fayetteville, those kind of regions, even Texarkana. So while we do have these storms ongoing at the moment, you're really just going to get some hail and wind whisk with this, but overall, nothing all too bad at the moment to talk about. Then again, we do have one severe warning, and you can see the front behind this that's going to be pushing through as well. So you have your frontal boundary right about there, actually a dry line setup that's going to initiate right about there, and your warm fronts kind of in and around here. So we're going to expect that to push up. You get your warmer temps. We're going to get more severe weather with this, and a front to kind of end it off. Now, this is not the Arctic front that a lot of people have probably seen that has your 1 degree temperatures behind it into the 20s to 30s in the deep south. That's going to come on about Monday, but this will still bring us some chillier temps. Nothing all too bad with that, though. So let's go over and take a look at some models here. We have some of those pulled up, but before we do that, I do want to look at some observed upper air kind of sounding so we can get an idea of what we're looking at. And I'm going to try to explain this since a lot of people are not going to understand what these charts are. But what we're looking at is what we call skew-T's. So this is basically plotting what the environment is looking at all the way up to about the top of the tropopause here. So about 15 kilometers or so into the atmosphere all the way down to the surface. And what we can tell with this is a few things severe weather-wise. One, we don't have a lot of that storm fuel that we talk about. So when you don't have a lot of CAPE, you're really going to get weaker storms. They can't really sustain themselves, and that's what we're thinking is going to happen for at least the next 3 to 4 hours until that front kicks more north, that warm front rather. And also, these are more shallow storms. Typically on, big severe weather days, you have your CAPE profiles all the way up to here. Again, it's not that big, or not really that big, but kind of getting the general idea of what we'd be looking for. And these dew points are really going to lead to what we call more elevated storms. To get a surface-based storm, you really need temperatures around the 60 to 65 degree range. That's what storms like. Preferably we'd want around 70s with this here, but at the moment we're not going to see all much severe weather-wise. And then you have your hodograph over on this side here. So winds are kind of not really the best profile-wise, and these are not going to be the cleanest looking storms on radar, but nonetheless could pack a severe punch. And if we go down to Shreveport, you can see a few things with this. So this is actually south of the warm front. So if you look around here, your warm front's a little bit like that. So Little Rock is north of it, and Shreveport's going to be a little bit south of it there. But you do have what we call a elevated mix layer. Essentially, what that is just well-mixed dry air that emanates from the desert southwest, pushes over into this region, and kind of gives a capping inversion. You've probably heard of that before. Essentially, what that is just a lid on the atmosphere, which you could call. So if you had right about here, a lot of storms are going to kind of push up through there, but they can't go because there's something holding them back. But if you can push that cap, then the storms in question can use the entire environment to their full potential. But at the moment, I'm not really seeing nothing all too severe with this. We're going to wait for more moisture to kick in because you need higher dew points for storms. If you have too much dry air, that can kind of close off your updrafts. You have more shallower updrafts and thus stronger storms, you could say, with that. And then if you go a little bit down to Lake Charles, where you do have some severe risk around that region, I will say your severe risk is going to be more north than there, I believe, but you also see that elevated mixed layer well into play there. So we're going to need a lot more moisture to really kick this up, throw it towards there, back down. You can kind of mix that air, and that's what we are kind of looking for if we're going to get anything severe weather inducive with this. So that's what we're looking at upper air wise. I do have some of the personal weather stations plotted around here, and what this kind of gives us is a overall view. So if we're just looking at the government installed ASOS stations, which I think I have those up right about here. So you don't really have a lot of them. You have a decent amount, enough to kind of plot out where everything is. But with this, we are able to have over probably about 10,000 in this entire region here plotted, giving us live data every about 10 seconds. So that is very nice to have, and you can see where everything's mainly elevated. If anything goes severe right now, it'd be kind of around this area here, tornado-wise, but even then, it's not looking all that good to get one. Nevertheless, we do have a level 3 out of 5 issued by the Storm Prediction Center for today. Let's kind of zoom out here, and that's that risk right about here. And we can zoom into it a little bit more on this view to kind of get a few more town names moved into there. So as you can see, Texarkana, Shreveport, Hot Springs, these kind of regions are going to be the area under the gun for that risk. I will say this is not the highest in level 3 risk I've seen, but it is a risk nonetheless to go over. And then kind of more outside of that, near the Little Rock, Greenville, Monroe, Alexandria, Paris, not really the Metroplex included with this. Those areas are going to be at a 2 out of 5 risk. And then a little bit more outside of that, you have Lafayette, Lake Charles, New Orleans, Jacksonville, Memphis, those kind of regions inside of there. But if I had to really bet, your main severe weather is going to be in about this region here. And that's a little bit too big. Kind of around here is where I would expect the stronger end storms to happen. And what's going to happen is this is going to push in to the early morning hours. So we're talking about a nocturnal type setup. And for that, we have to go over to the Storm Prediction Center to pull up tomorrow's outlook, which was actually at one point a 10% chance of significant tornadoes. Those are EF2 plus tornadoes, but that has since went down to a level 3 risk for wind. Now, you do still have a level 5 risk all throughout here. So it's going to be Atlanta, Columbus, Dothan, Birmingham. You see Jackson there, Greenville, all the way up to the East Coast. So Raleigh, Charlotte, Charleston, Savannah. Those regions are going to really be the area that we're looking at severe weather-wise. But if I had to bet on an area, it'd probably be around here. So this is going to be your region to watch for the most severe storms as we go on to the overnight into the morning hours. And you do also have some hail risk with that and a tornado risk, but wind, they do have it hatched here. I'm not sure how too much I agree on this, but nevertheless, if you're going to be near the Greenville region, kind of near Tupelo, Columbus, those areas, you're on a 30% significant risk. So what that means is you have a 10% or greater probability of getting wind gusts of about 65 knots or greater within a 25-mile point. So we could get some gustier winds. I'm not thinking all too severe at the moment, but it is something to look at. And the whole reason we're having this severe weather is, if I put a loop on this here, you can kind of see this is the mid levels of the atmosphere. We're looking at about 500 millibars. And what these lines are right here is your trough. So you see it digs down right about there, and this is where your severe weather is going to be. So you have, I guess right now, probably negatively tilted into positively tilted trough moving through. This is your ongoing convection near that warm front going. This is going to be your hail risk. Not too much of a tornado risk, but just something to watch with that. But your main stuff is going to come once this front pushes on through the region and dry line. And even if we go into a closer view, I have a few things plotted here. Mainly your thunder with this, so those are your lightning strikes right there. And you also have your dew points, which, if we want severe weather, you kind of want these 60s dew points and 50s, which this is one of the limiting factors for getting some robust severe weather, is we're not going to have all that good of moisture return that far north. Now, some models show it different than others, but at the moment, I'm not too hopeful with that there. But again, stuff can change. It's something to keep a very close eye on. And nevertheless, we are going to pull up a few models, go over that there. So let's see if we can get this loaded. We're going to go pull up the Zero Zulu. So at about 6 p.m., the model runs to its full 48-hour range, and we can get very close up into these storms. Now, it doesn't have any of that ongoing convection, but nevertheless, we do have that going through about those regions. So you can see models show this kind of initial banding of storms. We're going to pull an environmental sounding out ahead of that, and your main issue with this is, like I said before, you don't get warm enough surface temperatures, you don't get kind of better moisture return in that region, thus you have maybe a little bit of a surface inversion there, and just not warm enough temps, so a lot of that is going to stay elevated. Remember, you need higher than about 58-degree dew points and higher than, I'd say, about 65 Fahrenheit temperatures to really get that robust severe weather, and we're close to it, but it's going to be cutting it pretty darn close with this. And you can kind of see those enlarged photographs that we always talk about, and more venting. So again, this is your precipitation being kind of shunted off to the storm. So if we had to draw how this would probably look, it'd be, so that's your hook echo, got your venting right about there, and then that's where your hook echo would be inside of that. So we can use photographs to really draw out what a storm could look like, and also show the winds with this. So you're going to be moving about 49 miles per hour. You do have a lot of strong shear, though, to note. So I do think the hail risk is going to probably be higher than the tornado risk. So if you're near those regions, I'll pull up the map once again real quick. So probably near Texarkana, Glenwood, Hot Springs, Arkadelphia, and mainly Shreveport, I'd keep a very close eye out. Even more north near Little Rock and Russellville, you're going to be watching for those hail threats. So if you have your cars out, put them under the carport for tonight. All of that good stuff. And if you do have some hail precautions, I'd probably go through that for tonight. And you should probably also have a weather radio just in case we do get that warning. I don't think it's going to be all too significant in nature. However, if we do have a tornado, you are going to want to have a way to get warnings for that, of course. Nevertheless, we go out throughout time. We're about 3 a.m. in the morning. Now, this is your main front, okay? So this is just all kind of warm front activity. So a lot of this stuff is not going to be tornadic. So if you're near Little Rock, I really think your risk goes down significantly with this, because if you're north of the warm front, hail and wind, south of it is where we have your main tornado threat. That's kind of what the SPC has been mentioning, and that's what we are agreeing with as well, that if anything can really become robust out here, have some good convection with it, you could probably get a tornado or two. So just something to kind of note with that there, but I do think we could get some stronger storms with this as we go on throughout time. So here's your cold front pushing on through. We're going to take another environmental sounding kind of ahead of that. And you can see this is not the worst sounding ever. You're in about the 60s. You really have that more shallow cape. Here's your 3 cape. Essentially what that is the cape in the lowest 3 kilometers of the atmosphere. So it really gives you a more robust line type threat. And I'm not really seeing a lot of prefrontals. Again, we like that for more discrete cells. Harder to get those stronger end tornadoes, but nevertheless, if you do have higher 3 cape, there has been studies that showed that you could get some stronger tornadoes with that, but I'm not seeing nothing too bad with this. I would prepare for a few tornadoes, maybe 1 or 2 significant, just something to watch and see how that plays out there. But you can see maybe we get some prefrontal activities as we go on throughout time. So we'll check near this region here, and then you get into more of a cape issue, more of those less elevated storms, but nonetheless your wind profiles are there. What we're going to be watching throughout time is kind of around these regions for anything that can really maintain themselves, and I'm seeing a pretty big convective available potential energy are cape storm fuel issues with these storms. So we're going to take a look at the mixed layer cape here, and not really all too much. I don't know if that's, yeah, that's a new severe thunderstorm warning for Garland County, Montgomery County. We're going to go to that just real quick and check that out. And I'm pretty sure that might be an extension for the current one. No, it's going to be this cell right about here, near the sim, story, those kind of areas. And like I said before, this is all elevated. You don't really have a tornado threat with this to worry about, but nonetheless, I do think they are warning this for, let's take a look here. So quarter-sized hail, that could very much bring some issues, and you're seeing the Fortune Valley, Muddy Creek, Pencil Bluff, Sims, Briggsville, those kind of regions. Could expect something there, but I'm not seeing all too much with that. Your wind threat is pretty much down, just kind of a hail threat. I will go ahead and pull up the rotation with these storms. I'll take a look at that, see what we have going with those. If this program wants to open. If not, we're just going to go back and check the future radar and all that good stuff, and we do have it up. So let's go over to Arkansas real quick, and you can see there is a little bit of rotation there, and that might honestly be a radar artifact for the main reason of you kind of have that beam going straight through there. That's kind of contaminated, so I don't really think nothing all too bad. And yeah, this is kind of one of the products we use to see if we have some messy or contaminated radar data, you could say, and that's exactly what we're seeing with this here. So, something to watch. I think this is all elevated, though. So, we're going to go back to the future radar. Look at that cape, and you can see that I really think the more eastern parts of Arkansas, southern regions, kind of near the Monroe area. Let me get my bearings straight here. So, kind of near Monroe, Greenville, those regions. You're going to have a less robust tornado threat. You're going to have a hail and wind threat, but nothing all too bad with it for the main fact of we don't have a lot of that cape to work with, which is good. We don't want tornadoes, but if you do have some more, we would have more of a concern with that. And you can also see that 3 cape that we talked about a second ago. Really all you need with this is about 50. And we're at about 42, so it's a little bit lower than we'd like to see. But there is a few fail modes with this to mention. So you have your temperatures, you have really the lack of that storm fuel that those storms are able to ingest. So a lot of stuff working in our favor here to not get those tornadoes, but it's something that we have to watch. And if you're more near the Sinlaw region, we can take a sounding there and see. And I really think our saving grace, Alexandria South, is going to be that warm nose, and you can really see it here. That's all of that dry air coming from the desert southwest, kind of pushing through the low levels and thus creating a EML. That's your capping inversion. It's not allowing all of that stuff at the surface to rise freely to the top of the tropopause here. So, is something to note, but also your wind kind of dynamics there are not the best, I would say. And as we go on throughout time, you get into the Mississippi region, those kind of areas. So if you're in central Mississippi, see what we're kind of looking at here, and I'm not really a fan of this. I think one of the issues we could be seeing is your storms are moving so fast. They're moving at about give or take 70 miles per hour. This would be in knots, or about 70 knots, give or take, around the 60 range if we put it into miles per hour. So an issue you could very much have, and we're going to get a little bit scientific-y here, but I'm going to try to explain it the best I can. But the real issue with having fast storms is, one, warning times are going to be hard to nail down. You're going to have to warn them a lot sooner, and you're going to have less time to act. But another thing is, with how small your warm sector is, that's kind of the playing zone for storms, the line between elevated and tornadic, like we talked about before, and that's going to be a big issue with this. So if we go to dew points, wind barbs, we're going to kind of play this out so you can see that threat overnight. That's your cold front pushing on through, very sharp cold front. But this is really going to be your issue for tomorrow. So if I was really picking a few areas that could get tornadoes, it's going to be within this region here. And one issue with that is that a lot of these storms are going to be racing, and enjoy my Supercell graphics here, but they're going to not have a lot of time in there before they're out of the warm sector, becoming elevated. Maybe we get some hail potential up near that region, near the Atlanta, Birmingham, any areas that's going to be north of the warm front could see that kind of issue, but it's really going to be something to note with that. I'm not looking at a big flooding threat, I will note that. Maybe near the north we pick up a nice 2 inches, Little Rock about an inch, but mainly towards the south, Birmingham areas, less than an inch for most regions. You can even see Florida getting in on that action there. But as we go on throughout time, I had to pick a region that looks the best for severe weather at the moment, kind of tornadoes. It would be right around that area that the SPC highlighted, because that's kind of where all of your ingredients are going to come together. So ingredients would be your lift, your kind of forcing mechanisms, all of those are going to be there to kind of give us some severe weather. Again, you can see those enlarged photographs, nice venting with them, all of that good stuff, but you still have that warm nose, that capping inversion there, kind of preventing some severe weather, which would be good. Again, that pushes on out. You start to get the Tupelo region into there, Jackson, Hattiesburg, those kind of regions. We can look north of Jackson there, and you can see that maybe that storm motion helps us out a lot here, but if anything can stay within that warm sector and root into an environment, and we get a little more cape, then we could very much have some issues on our hands here. But at the moment, that could be a saving grace with this event, which would be nice. And as we go on throughout time, so this is about a little after 12 in the morning, we're going to about midday here, near the noon hours. That's where you start to get Montgomery into the place, Troy, Alabama, Panama City, Mobile, the same regions I got impacted before. I will say, this event is more robust than the last event. Do I think we're going to have multiple EF3s? No. Do I think we will have some tornadoes? Yes. So it is something to prepare for. Not completely throw under the bus, but it's something that everyone should be aware about. But I really think there is a lot of fail modes we have to think about. So one, you don't get a lot of cape. Now, one thing to know with this is that we're showing about 600 or so. If you go back to the last event, models didn't really like that. They were underdoing the amount of convective available potential energy we had. So could that be a factor with this? Very possible. But nonetheless, I do think you're going to have to overcome your temperature issues. I would like smaller storm motions, and then again, you don't really have those enlarged photographs that we like to see, which is a bit of an issue, but not all too bad, I would say. And then we can go a little bit more into the future. This is where we get into the Carolina threat. South Georgia is going to be at play for this event too. But you really have smaller photographs, and to kind of save us doing all of those little plot soundings there, we can just put the photograph map with surface-based cape into play there. So you can see I really think north of this region here, so kind of near Atlanta, these regions, we have a big Cape issue to talk about, but at play would be these kind of regions here I'd be watching for a good severe storm. But north of there, you could have some hail, but I'm not all favoring this risk too much. But nonetheless, we do have a enhanced risk put out by the Storm Prediction Center. They did downgrade that from last night because it wasn't enhanced for tornadoes. Uh, you do have one nonetheless, if I can find it. So yeah, you're in a slight risk for Columbiana, those areas, Dothan. Mainly just a 5%. I don't see this getting upgraded, by the way. So if you're in Atlanta, those regions, Dothan, Columbiana, Raleigh, I don't think you're going to get into the 10% chance of significant tornadoes. However, you could still see a few tornadoes with this, and I think that's what they were kind of mentioning inside of this discussion, is that you're really going to have a convective available potential energy issue. You're going to have all of those that we talked about just a second ago. But just something to note, I want to go into the mesoscale analysis of this, just kind of giving us a view of what we're seeing currently and maybe a little bit into the future. So cape-wise, a lot of this is capped. So we just talked about capping before. When you see these bluish colors, maybe even dark blue, that's when you have a lot of multi-layer sin. So this is kind of a fancier way to say a capping inversion is in place. Something is not letting those parcels rise freely, thus giving you more of a hail threat, and that's what we're seeing around these regions here. But I'm going to really be watching along this line here. Anything that can form ahead or maybe inside the line could have the threat of a few tornadoes, but nonetheless, your trough is still kicking on through. A lot of that good low-level flow, though, is kicked way towards the south there, so we're kind of in the middle of positively to negatively tilted. I think it'd be a little more positive at the moment, but nonetheless, you do have a little bit of flow kind of around this region here that's going to aid in that severe weather. And if we go over to temperature and dew points, we're going to still have to allow a little bit of time, but RAP, which is one of the shorter end models we use to kind of see this, are showing the threats going up to about south of Arkansas. So maybe we get some 60s into there. I still think it's going to be a very marginal to slight risk threat. But who knows? We'll see how that plays out. Just have multiple ways to really get warnings with these. And then your low-level jet is already there. So that's kind of your winds near the surface. It's not really at the middle, but kind of a quarter away into the middle of the atmosphere. You can see a lot of those southerlies are just pouring in, kind of helping getting our moisture more north there. But I don't think it's going to be enough to get it all the way up to about Little Rock to be potentially tornadic in nature. So that is something to note. Pretty good. We can go over and check our surface forward in 3 Cape, and it is starting to get there. This is what some people will call the cheat code. I won't go that far and call it that, but if you have, your 3 kilometer Cape at a very high levels, remember, all you need for this to really be so-called good is over 50 joules per kilogram, and you're kind of, bluish circles here. You can see it all around the map. That is your low-level spin, your vorticity. Vorticity, kind of a fancier word for spinning in the atmosphere. And those kind of more circles you have inside of there, the higher values, the more spin you have. And when you combine those two elements, you really get the greater risk for severe weather. And that's why I'm seeing or thinking this line will have the threat for a few embedded tornadoes with it. I don't think it's going to be all too significant in nature. That's where I kind of differ from the SPC there. But I do think you could get some embedded tornadoes. New severe thunderstorm warning for Montgomery, Pike, Polk, and Yell counties. So that's going to continue to happen throughout the night. But nothing tornadic with that. And if we go over to our precipitable water values, this is another thing we look for, kind of judging, if you have a tornado, how low precipitation will it be? How much rain is going to be around the base of that storm and kind of lead to visibility issues? And we're not seeing a lot of that, but another second factor with this is flash flooding. If you have higher values, you're going to get more flash flooding. So that's why I think the flooding threat with this is going to be very, very marginal. Sure, the areas that flood a lot are probably going to get some flooding, but just regionally, I'm not seeing all too big of a threat with that, which is good. If we go over to the base radar, that's kind of what we're looking. See some storms out in the Oklahoma region that we're watching as well. So let's see here. So a lot of that stuff moves on out with time. So you see near the Florida area, those kind of regions, you're gonna have some popcorn type storms with that there. But I do think up towards the north, those are what we call updraft helicity tracks. And maybe I would not be surprised if we go to the SPC outlook here. So right now we're at a 5%. Maybe we get a 15% chance right about here on the northern part, mainly because we could get some 2-inch plus hail with this, very possible, as we go on throughout time. So this is something to note, but not all too significant, really. So let's go over to, what do we have up there? Yeah, so that's the storms moving on through. We're going into about noon here. You can kind of see some hooks on the simulated radar around those regions there. So, maybe we get something, but I really think we have a Cape issue that's going to lead to weaker storms. But nonetheless, this pushes on through. This is not going to be a multi-day type threat, but, I mean, those look rather intriguing. You see you're in 70s, 60s, good convective available potential energy. Your hodographs are relatively elongated, so maybe we get the threat of a tornado or two. I do think we're going to have a few tornadoes possible with this, but the chance of them being significant, EF2+, I think are about 25 to maybe 45% at the moment. So not all too severe with that. As you can see, more kind of isolated popcorn storms as you get into the South Carolina region. That's going to be all elevated. But as you go to the Florida Peninsula, which was also hit hard, we do have more of a Cape issue. So your main factors as we go through there is, one, can we get some Cape? That's going to be the main issue. Two is going to be, can we have any surface heating? If I can actually draw an F properly. Heating. Those are going to be your two main factors with this. So if you can get those two things, and dry air is not much of an issue, then maybe we get a few tornadoes with that. But I don't think it's all that big of a deal. And in a second here, we are going to go through some comments in the YouTube chat, going over some more specific regions that could experience some severe weather with this. But I think this is all out by your Saturday morning. Actually, maybe we could say before midnight or 6 p.m. That's your cold front trailing behind there. And then once that is over, we're going to be in about the 50s or so to start off. And then you have your Arctic front to talk about, which we are going to go over here. So maybe when we get into Saturday, some areas below freezing. This is not your Arctic front. That's actually your Arctic front behind here coming into Sunday and Monday. So you can see some 18 digits behind there, 20s. But we're really warm in the southeast for about those regions there, which is good. So that's kind of everything we got to go over with this here. After that, severe weather is going to be in a big lull. I don't think we're going to have anything really robust. We do also have a threat to talk about towards the north, which I don't know if the SPC is outlining, and they're not outlining this risk, Well, they do have a marginal out, but we could see more of a cold core type setup, which this is different from your typical uh, plains or Dixie setup with that. This is more of a surface low, providing all of your ingredients to get lift and everything into there. And you also require less for the environment or less of the environment to get more kind of significant storms to get going with that. And we can check that out more towards the north here. That's going to take us up towards we can try the Ohio Valley region, and I think that's going to be good enough. So let's go out to, I'm going to put on dew points and wind barbs. But as we go on right there, this is your surface low. Right about here. I'm going to circle that for you. So right there is your surface low, fronts around there. So maybe these regions here could see kind of a cold core, pseudo cold core setup with this. But what I want to really see is about 500 millibars. I have to go to the College of DuPage for this. We'll check out their models here. We're going to look at the NAM for this kind of scenario. Let's go up to right about there. If we put on our 500 millibar temperature, what we're looking for with this here is pretty low temperatures. So you're looking for right about this range here. So in the 20s to the 16, maybe right about there is what you're looking for a cold core setup. And we are seeing some relatively colder temps with that embedded into there. So maybe we get the threat for a few spin-up tornadoes. I don't think they're going to be long-lived in nature by any stretch of the imagination, but there is some risk to talk about with that, and I wish there were some better sectors we could use for this. But the site's a little bit different than the last one we were using, but we can go to the HER, which a lot of people like to use. Let me actually see which ones have this here. 500 millibar temperature. There we go. We can look on the wrap here. You can see it's going to be pushing through, but right about here, let's see central Kentucky. We're about southern areas of Tennessee, and I think that might be a little bit ahead of there. So we can kind of put on the, let's try mean layer cape and see in there. There's going to be a little bit of an area to watch, so we're going to see north of the Nashville area. Mainly into Kentucky is going to be the areas we're going to be watching for this. And there's a little bit, but there's a lot of stuff. This is really why the SPC isn't outlining these regions, mainly for the fact of we don't have a lot of cape, which we look for in storms, so mainly towards this part here. And we don't have a lot of shear to talk about with that as well. So that's good for the northern parts right there. What I will do, if we have any questions, we're going to go check into the chat and see. There's not all too much right there, but we will go over a few regions and all that good stuff right about there. So let's see. Kind of want to check the wrap a little bit more. See what it's showing with that. So boundaries right about there. Maybe in here's where you would get your severe weather if we did have any, which I do think we will in southern Arkansas. And you do have your hodographs up near there. They are pretty enlarged in nature, so you have a little bit of cape, but it's not really all that bad. And yeah, we can do snow. Let's do a little bit of snow and talk about the Arctic front, really. And then we're going to wrap this up here. So, we are going to use the College of DuPage, use their site for this here, and we're going to use, not the wrap, of course, we're going to probably use the GFS. Let's do, bear with me, and we're going to have to use Pivotal Weather, because I cannot seem to find that on there, but what everyone seems to like, what I'm going to actually do is I'm going to do a close-up with the HER here for snow, because on this backside of the low, sometimes with that leftover moisture, you can kind of get a little bit of, so if your severe weather's right about that behind the front, you can get a little bit of snow mixed into there, which is, I think that's what we could see in around these regions. It's not going to be all too much. So that's going to be your south central region we can look at here. let's go over to our total snowfall. And there's going to be a little bit, kind of a light dusting, maybe an inch or so, northern Arkansas, those regions. I'm not seeing nothing too bad with this, but if we go into more of a national type view, and looking at the GFS, let's see what we're looking at snowfall-wise, and look towards the north. This low is going to be a decent amount of snow up towards the northern regions. So we're talking about areas like northern, so all of Wisconsin, maybe the Illinois region, Iowa. I think Michigan's going to get hit hard with this, but it's really going to be depending on where this low tracks. And what I want to do, talking about this, is really looking at ensembles, because that's going to tell us the full story instead of just looking at one exact model. So to kind of understand this, wherever your low is, so if it's more south, you're going to get less snow towards the north. If it's more north, then you're going to get more snow towards the north. So your low's right about there, and there's not a lot of spread with it. Kind of the mean of this is going to be right about there. So about a 983 millibar low. So that's relatively strong with this event. So I do think we're going to get some pretty strong snow with this here. And as we pull it throughout time, that kind of pulls off towards the north there. And we have high pressure over the region for Wednesday. Why is that an issue? Well, the main reason while that's going to, or why rather it's going to be an issue, is because we're going to be near or below freezing in these regions. So if you have more or less cloud cover rather, you're going to have a lot more cooling at the surface. However, if you have some cloud cover, we kind of stay steady or maybe even rise a degree or two compared to having that kind of solar radiational cooling, so to speak, with that there. But I'm not really seeing all too much systems after that. This is really going to be a whopper of a system, I will say, to say the least. Not sure if we can pull snow def. Not really too much with that. So we're going to get a little bit of snow in and around there. Maybe up to around 12 to 16 inches. Not really seeing more than a foot in some areas, but if we go over to the GFS model, this is just starting to run, but we can look at the 18Z run of it too. Now, as you can see, let's go to total snowfall. Let's push it out through there. So, yeah, maybe we talk about 12 to 16 at the lower end, about 6 inches for most of those regions there. But if we're talking about southern Missouri, maybe Kentucky, you're not going to get all too much, maybe a light dusting with that, but that's going to be about it with that. Nonetheless, once that moves out, colder temperatures behind, which that's going to be the last and probably only thing we're going to talk about with it, is the cold temps behind it, which will definitely be our first big freeze of the season. So you can see, look at all that Arctic air towards the north. So you're about minus into the teens to 20s up there below. And that's going to kind of modify to air mass towards the south, thus bring all of us into some cooler temperatures. So you can see our first front does not really do it. That's your severe weather front. We are going to get below freezing in some spots rather. That's going to stay more north, and then your next big front pushes all of that more south. So by about Wednesday morning, we're going to go to about 12Z. This is what the temperatures could be looking like. And by the way, this is not wind chills, so maybe up to about minus 17 in Iowa. Single digits as you go towards the Midwest, and even pretty chilly in Florida. It's going to be in the 40s. So nowhere in the continental United States will be above 70 degrees on Wednesday. So that is definitely very big. And to put it into perspective, if we pull a temperature anomaly, this is basically taking the average where we should be for this time of year and putting it in a number. Once this pushes out through, we are going to be about near 40 degrees below normal for this time of year in spots. So this is going to be very significant. It doesn't last for too long, but again, we're in the winter times. This could last. You can get more of that comes in, a lot less that comes in. It really just depends, and it's going to be something bearing to watch. But one last product I'm going to show is our wind chills. Now, this is where it's going to be very dangerous. So let's push this all the way throughout Wednesday here. This is going to be Wednesday morning. So we could be near negative 34 Illinois. You're at about negative 12, negative 10 around the Midwest areas. And even into Louisiana, Alabama, we are in the teens to around single digits. So that is something to note as well. However, I do think we're going to have some hard freeze issues, but it's not going to be like last year where we're below freezing for 30 hours plus. We are going to have some times where we can warm up. So I'm not seeing nothing all too significant below freezing wise, but it is something that's going to be bared watching with this as we go on throughout time. But that's about all that we're going to have for this forecast discussion here. Again, main topics are going to be we're going to have some severe weather throughout tonight to talk about. As you can see, more severe warnings actually near the Tulsa region with these elevated storms. Broken area, New Tulsa. Got a report from a spotter, or actually NWS employee, of about less than an inch hail about that region there. And some severe thunderstorm warnings continue for the Story, Mount Ida, Norman, Big Fork areas, right in about those regions there. So, once again, make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the coverage. We will be back with some live storm chasing tomorrow with one of our storm chasers out there chasing the Alabama and Mississippi regions. But then again, main threats we're going to be looking at some severe weather tonight. Could have a few tornadoes into the next day. More hail, more wind, more threat of a tornado. Arctic front dips on down by Monday to Tuesday. Then after that, it's all up in air. So something that we're going to have to watch. But once again, thank you all for coming out to this. We will have more of these kind of live streams in the future. But once again, like, subscribe.